The trading post at Fort Laramie smelled of tobacco, sweat, and desperation. Sarah Brennan stood at the counter, her trembling fingers clutching the only thing of value she had left, her mother's silver locket. The chain had broken during the 3-week flight from her father's homestead. The same night, she'd fled with nothing but the threadbare dress on her back and the bruises hidden beneath it. "Please," she whispered to the trader, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth. "I just need enough cornmeal to get me through the week, maybe some jerky." The trader barely glanced at the locket before spitting into a tin cup. "Silver's worth something, girl, but not much out here. Best I can do is a pound of cornmeal. Take it or leave it." Before you continue with Sarah's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your support is incredibly important to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'm also curious, where are you listening to this story from? Let me know in the comments. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. A pound of cornmeal wouldn't last 3 days. She'd barely survived the journey here, walking most of the way after her horse went lame. Her father's men could still be looking for her. He'd promised to drag her back and marry her to his business partner, a man twice her age, with fists like hammers and breath like rot-gut whiskey. "I'll take it," she said, her voice breaking. "Wait." The word cut through the dim trading post like a blade. Sarah turned to see a man standing in the doorway, backlit by the harsh Wyoming sun. As he stepped inside, she saw him clearly. Tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the frame, skin bronzed by years under the open sky, and black hair that fell past his shoulders. He wore buckskin leggings and a simple cotton shirt, with a knife sheathed at his hip and a rifle slung across his back. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark as midnight, yet somehow warm when they settled on her face. "She needs more than cornmeal, Tucker," the man said, his voice deep and steady. "She needs a real meal, supplies, and a safe place to rest." The trader shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Running Wolf, I run a business here, then run it honestly." Running Wolf approached the counter, moving with a predator's grace. He placed several gold coins on the worn wood. "Load up a pack with cornmeal, jerky, beans, salt, and ammunition, and add a good blanket, a thick one." Sarah stared at him, her heart pounding. She'd heard stories about Running Wolf, half Lakota, half white, raised by his mother's people after his father abandoned them. He owned one of the largest ranches in the territory, built with his own hands and defended against everyone who tried to take it. Some called him savage, others called him the most honorable man in Wyoming. "I can't accept charity," Sarah said, though her stomach clenched with hunger at the thought of real food. Running Wolf turned to her, and for a moment, something passed between them. Recognition of pain, perhaps, or the understanding that comes from surviving things that should have killed you. "Not charity," he said quietly. "Trade. You need supplies. I need help at my ranch. My cook left last month to get married, and I'm tired of burning my own meals." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin flush. "You look like you can work hard. You look like you need a place where no one will find you." Sarah's breath caught. How did he know? "The bruises on your wrist," he said, answering her unspoken question. "The way you keep watching the door. The fact that you're alone at a trading post, 3 days' ride from the nearest settlement." His jaw tightened. "I know the look of someone running from something, or someone." Tucker dumped the supplies on the counter with more force than necessary. That'll be $12, Running Wolf. Running Wolf didn't even glance at the trader. His eyes remained locked on Sarah. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah Brennan. Sarah. He said it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. I have a cabin on my property. Private. You'd have your own space. I'm not asking for anything except honest work. Cooking, maybe some mending. The ranch hands eat like wolves, and they're starting to complain about my stew. A hint of something that might have been humor touched his lips. Can't say I blame them. I don't know you, Sarah said, though every instinct screamed at her to accept. Anything was better than starving. Anything was better than her father's men finding her. No, Running Wolf agreed, but you know you're out of options. And I know I'm offering you a chance. He picked up the bundle of supplies and headed for the door, then paused to look back at her. My ranch is 5 miles west. The white house with the blue door. If you decide you want the job, come at dawn tomorrow. If not, he shrugged. Keep the locket. But take the supplies anyway. No woman should go hungry because she's got pride. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah staring after him with her mother's locket still clutched in her hand. She arrived at dawn. The ranch spread across a valley like something from a dream. A sturdy house with that distinctive blue door. A barn larger than any she'd seen. Corrals holding dozens of horses, and fields that stretched toward the mountains. Everything spoke of hard work and careful planning. This wasn't luck. This was a man who'd built something from nothing and refused to let anyone take it from him. Running Wolf met her at the gate. He'd been expecting her. Hungry? He asked. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. He led her to the house without another word. The interior was simple but clean. Wooden furniture clearly made by hand, a stone fireplace, windows that let in the morning light. It smelled like leather and sage and something else, something warm and lived in, that made her chest ache with longing for a home she'd never really had. Running Wolf pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Sit. Within minutes, he'd prepared eggs, bacon, and bread that must have come from town. Sarah tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some dignity, but she was so hungry that tears leaked from her eyes as she swallowed. Running Wolf sat across from her, drinking coffee and watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Thank you, she finally managed. Don't thank me yet. The work's real. I've got 5 ranch hands who eat 3 times a day and expect it hot. They're good men, but they're rough around the edges. They won't bother you, I'll make sure of that. But they're not going to be gentle with their words. I can handle rough words, Sarah said, meeting his gaze. Words don't leave marks that last. Something flickered in Running Wolf's expression. Anger, maybe, or recognition. No, they don't. He showed her the cabin after breakfast. It was small, but solid, with a real bed, a stove, and a door that locked from the inside. Sarah ran her fingers over the lock, and her eyes burned. I'll never ask you to open that door if you don't want to, Running Wolf said from behind her. Your space is yours, always. Sarah turned to look at him, this man who was offering her safety without demanding anything in return. Why are you helping me? Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. Because no one helped my mother when she needed it? Because I know what it's like to be alone in the world with everyone's hand turned against you. He met her eyes, and the intensity there stole her breath. Because you're not property, Sarah Brennan. You're a person, and every person deserves a chance to be free. The first week passed in a blur of work. Sarah rose before dawn to start breakfast for the ranch hands. Hardened men with sun-weathered faces and calloused hands, who looked at her with curiosity but kept their distance after Running Wolf had a quiet word with each of them. She cooked 3 meals a day, scrubbed pots until her hands were raw, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. But she noticed things. She noticed how Running Wolf worked harder than any of his men, mending fences in the brutal sun, breaking horses with a patience that seemed endless, checking on every animal like each one mattered. She noticed how he was always the last to eat, making sure everyone else had enough first. She noticed the scars on his hands and the careful way he moved, like a man who'd learned to survive by being smarter and tougher than everyone around him. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, quick glances when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his gaze lingering on her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. 2 weeks in, a storm rolled over the mountains. Sarah had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The sky turned black as pitch, and wind howled across the valley like something alive and angry. Rain came in sheets so thick she couldn't see the barn from the kitchen window. She was cleaning up after supper when the door burst open. Running Wolf stood there, soaked to the bone, blood running down his face from a cut above his eyebrow. What happened? Sarah dropped the dish towel and rushed at him. Horse spooked in the storm, threw me into a fence post. He touched his forehead and winced. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Sit down. To her surprise, he obeyed. She fetched clean water and cloth, then carefully cleaned the wound. Her hands shook as she worked, partly from adrenaline and partly from the sudden awareness of how close they were. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smell the rain and sage scent that clung to him. Go slow, Running Wolf said quietly. It hurts. Sarah's hands gentled immediately. Sorry. Don't be. He caught her wrist carefully, his fingers warm against her pulse. I just wanted you to know. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something electric and dangerous, and utterly inevitable. Sarah's breath hitched. I should finish, she whispered. Yes, but neither of them moved. The storm raged outside, and inside, something else was building. Something that had been growing since that first moment in the trading post, when he'd looked at her like she mattered. Sarah forced herself to step back and finish cleaning the wound. Her hands were steadier now, but her heart was racing. She could feel Running Wolf's eyes on her face, studying every detail like he was memorizing her. There, she said finally. You'll have a bruise, but the cut's not deep. Thank you. It's the least I can do. You've given me so much. Sarah, Running Wolf stood, and suddenly they were even closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You don't owe me anything. I need you to understand that. You're here because I wanted to help, not because you have to repay some debt. I know, Sarah said softly, but I want to. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Running Wolf's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might touch her, but he stepped back instead, putting careful distance between them. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. Storm like this, you won't sleep easy. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the sound of rain hammering on the roof. 3 weeks became a month. A month became 2. Sarah learned the rhythms of the ranch, the way the horses whinnied for their morning grain, the sound of the hands joking as they worked, the sight of Running Wolf riding across the fields at sunset. She learned to bake bread the way his mother had taught him, using a recipe he wrote out carefully in precise handwriting. She learned to laugh again at the dinner table, listening to the hands tell outrageous stories about broncos and wolves and the winter of '81, when the snow got so deep they had to dig tunnels to reach the barn. And she learned Running Wolf. She learned that he read poetry by lamplight when he thought everyone was asleep. She learned that he spoke 3 languages: English, Lakota, and enough Spanish to trade with the vaqueros down south. She learned that he'd fought in range wars to keep his land, and that he carried the weight of every life he'd taken like stones in his pockets. She learned that he was gentle with injured animals and fierce with anyone who threatened what was his. And slowly, carefully, she learned that she was falling in love with him. It terrified her. One evening, after the hands had gone to their bunkhouse, and she was washing the last of the dishes, Running Wolf came into the kitchen. He often did this, helping her with the final chores of the day, their conversations flowing easy now, comfortable in a way that felt like home. "I need to teach you to shoot," he said without preamble. Sarah nearly dropped the plate she was holding. "What?" "To shoot. A rifle." Running Wolf leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Out here, everyone needs to know how to protect themselves, and—" He paused, something dark crossing his face. "If anyone comes looking for you, you need to be able to defend yourself." Sarah's hands stilled in the dishwater. She hadn't told him everything about her father, about the things that had driven her to run. But somehow, he understood anyway. "All right," she said quietly. They started the next day. Running Wolf was a patient teacher, showing her how to hold the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze rather than pull the trigger. His hands were careful when he adjusted her stance, his voice steady when he corrected her aim. "You're not trying to kill the target with anger," he said after her 5th shot went wide. "You're trying to become still inside. Find that quiet place where nothing exists except you and what you're aiming at." Sarah tried again. This time, the bottle shattered. "There," Running Wolf said, and there was pride in his voice. "You're a natural." Over the following weeks, they fell into a new pattern. Every evening after supper, they'd go out to practice. But it became more than shooting. Running Wolf taught her to track, showing her how to read signs in the dirt and broken branches. He taught her to ride better, to handle a horse with confidence rather than fear. He taught her the names of plants, which ones healed, which ones fed, which ones killed. And in teaching her, he revealed himself. He told her about his mother, a Lakota woman who'd loved a white fur trader and paid the price for it, shunned by some of her people and despised by most of his. He told her about building this ranch with nothing but his own hands and determination, about fighting off claim jumpers and rustlers, about the lonely years when he'd convinced himself that solitude was safety. "I made a promise," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. "After my mother died, I promised I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me like her death hurt. I told myself love was weakness." Sarah's heart clenched. What changed? Running Wolf turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. "You did." Before she could respond, one of the hands, Tom, a grizzled cowboy with a scar across his jaw, came running up to the house. "Boss, riders coming in fast from the east." "6 of them, and they don't look friendly." Running Wolf was on his feet in an instant, his whole demeanor shifting to something harder, more dangerous. "Get everyone armed and in position. Sarah." He turned to her, and there was command in his voice. "Get in the house. Lock the doors. If shooting starts, you get to the cellar and stay there until I come for you." "Who are they?" "Don't know yet. But anyone riding that hard is either running from trouble or bringing it." He gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. "Promise me you'll stay inside." Sarah wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. "I promise." She watched from the window as the riders approached. Even from a distance, she could see they were rough men, the kind who carried their violence like a second skin. Running Wolf met them at the gate, and though she couldn't hear the conversation, she could read the tension in every line of his body. Then one of the men pointed at the house, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that gesture, knew that posture. One of the riders was her father's foreman, Jack Brennan. Her cousin, a man who'd looked the other way every time her father's fists flew. And if Jack was here, it meant her father knew where she was. Sarah's hands shook as she backed away from the window. She should run. Should get to the cellar like Running Wolf said. But something kept her frozen, watching as the conversation grew more heated. Then Jack made a mistake. He reached for his gun. Running Wolf was faster. His rifle came up in one smooth motion, trained on Jack's chest before the man could clear leather. The other ranch hands appeared from strategic positions, behind the barn, in the loft, at the corners of the house, all armed, all ready. "You're on my land uninvited," Running Wolf said, his voice carrying across the yard. "That makes you trespassers. I'm giving you one chance to turn around and ride away." "We're here for Sarah Brennan," Jack called out. "Her father wants her home. She's his property, and you've got no right keeping her." "She's not property." Running Wolf's voice went cold as winter steel. "She's a person, and she's under my protection. That means if you want her, you go through me first. Then that's how it'll be." Everything happened fast. Jack's hand moved, and Running Wolf's rifle barked. Jack went down with a bullet in his shoulder, a deliberate wound, Sarah realized. Running Wolf could have killed him easily, but chose not to. The other riders drew their weapons, and the ranch exploded in gunfire. Sarah didn't think. She grabbed the rifle Running Wolf had given her and ran outside. One of the attackers had flanked around the side of the house, clearly trying to get to her while everyone was distracted. He raised his gun, sighting on Running Wolf's unprotected back. Sarah lifted her rifle, found that still place inside herself, and fired. The man dropped, clutching his leg, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. Running Wolf spun around, his eyes widening when he saw her. "Sarah, behind you!" He dropped and rolled as another rider charged past on horseback, gun blazing. Tom took that one down with a shot that sent him tumbling from the saddle. The fight was over in minutes. 2 of the attackers were wounded, the rest had fled, and Jack lay in the dirt, clutching his shoulder and cursing. Running Wolf was at Sarah's side in 3 strides. His hands ran over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No. Are you?" "I'm fine. But you were supposed to stay inside. He was going to shoot you." Sarah's voice shook, the adrenaline finally hitting her. "I couldn't just watch." Running Wolf stared at her for a long moment, something fierce and tender warring in his expression. Then he pulled her against his chest, one hand cupping the back of her head, and she felt his heart hammering against her cheek. "You saved my life," he said roughly. "You saved mine first." Tom and the other hands were tying up the wounded men. Jack glared at Sarah with pure hatred. "Your father won't stop. He'll send more men. He'll burn this whole place down if he has to. Running Wolf stepped in front of Sarah, putting himself between her and Jack like a wall. Then tell him this. Sarah Brennan is under the protection of Running Wolf. She's part of my family now. Anyone who comes for her will face the same as you, only next time I won't be aiming to wound. He leaned down, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. And tell him one more thing. If he ever touches her again, I'll die before I hurt you. That's a lie. I'll hunt him down like the coward he is and make him wish he'd never been born. Jack paled at the cold promise in Running Wolf's eyes. Get them off my land, Running Wolf told his men. Make sure they understand that if they come back, they'll leave in boxes. As the hands hauled away the prisoners, Sarah realized she was shaking, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming certainty of what she felt. This man had stood between her and danger without hesitation, had defended her like she was worth defending, had made her feel, for the first time in her life, like she belonged somewhere. Sarah, Running Wolf turned to her, and his hands were gentle when they cupped her face. You can't stay here now. It's too dangerous. I'll give you money, supplies, help you get to California or... No. What? No. Sarah put her hands over his, holding them against her face. I'm not leaving. I'm not running anymore. This is where I belong. With you. Running Wolf's breath caught. Sarah, if you stay, they might come back. They might, then we'll fight together. Sarah met his eyes, letting him see everything she felt, the fear, the determination, the love that had been growing in her heart like wildflowers after rain. You said I was under your protection. You said I was part of your family. Did you mean it? Yes, every word. Then protect me by letting me stand beside you, not by sending me away. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath on her face. I see a man worth staying for, Running Wolf. I see a man worth loving. Something broke in his expression, some last wall crumbling to dust. He kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, like she was water after years in the desert, like she was home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Running Wolf rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise this will be easy, he said roughly. Your father won't stop. There will be more fights, more danger. I know. And I'm not an easy man to love. I'm half wild, Sarah. I always will be. Good. Sarah smiled, her hands sliding into his hair. I'm not interested in easy. I'm interested in real. And you're the most real thing I've ever known. Together, then? Together. Sarah's father sent 3 more groups of men over the next 2 months. Each one was turned away, some peacefully, some not. Word spread across Wyoming territory that Running Wolf had claimed Sarah Brennan, and that anyone who troubled her would answer to him. Eventually, even her father understood. The last message they received was a terse letter stating that Sarah was no longer his concern and was dead to him. Sarah burned the letter without a tear. That part of her life was over. On a cool October evening, with the aspens turning gold and the first snow dusting the mountain peaks, Running Wolf took Sarah riding up to a meadow where wild sage grew thick, and the sky seemed close enough to touch. They sat on a blanket, watching the sunset paint everything amber and rose. I want to marry you, Running Wolf said suddenly. Sarah turned to look at him, her heart catching. Not because of your father, or because you need protection, or because it's practical. He took her hand, his thumb tracing her palm in slow circles. I want to marry you because I love you, because you make me laugh, Because you're brave and strong and you shoot better than half my ranch hands. Because when I wake up, the first thing I want to see is your face." He paused, and there was vulnerability in his eyes that took her breath away. "Because you saw past everything I was supposed to be and loved who I really am." Sarah's eyes burned with tears. "Yes. I haven't finished asking. I don't care. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Running Wolf laughed, actually laughed, the sound bright and free, and pulled her into his arms. They fell back onto the blanket together, and Sarah kissed him until they were both dizzy with it. "You know," she said, pulling back just enough to meet his eyes, "I came to that trading post planning to trade my mother's locket for a pound of cornmeal. I thought I'd lost everything. And now I know I was exactly where I needed to be. Traded for corn and gunpowder, but fate made me the wife of the most powerful warrior in the West." She touched his face gently. "I found home, Running Wolf. I found you." "No, Sarah." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "We found each other." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. The hands stood as witnesses, and an old Lakota medicine man performed the ritual in both English and Lakota, binding them together with words as old as the land itself. Sarah wore a dress of soft deerskin that Running Wolf's aunt had made, decorated with beadwork that had been his mother's. Running Wolf wore his finest buckskins and his hair braided with sage. When the medicine man told them they were married, Running Wolf lifted Sarah in his arms and spun her around, while the hands cheered and fired their guns in the air. The celebration lasted until dawn, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. But Sarah's favorite moment came later, when they were finally alone in the house that was now truly theirs. Running Wolf carried her over the threshold like she weighed nothing, and when he set her down, his eyes were soft. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. When Sarah opened it, she gasped. Inside was her mother's locket, the one she'd tried to trade at Fort Laramie all those months ago. "I went back and bought it from Tucker the day after you came to the ranch," Running Wolf said quietly. "I knew you'd regret losing it, knew it mattered to you." Sarah's hands shook as she held the locket. "You bought this before you even knew me, before you knew if I'd stay." "I knew." Running Wolf touched her face gently. "Something in me recognized something in you that first day. I looked at you and saw someone worth saving, someone worth keeping safe, someone worth loving." "I love you," Sarah whispered, "more than I have words for." "Then don't use words." She didn't. 5 years later, Sarah stood on the porch of their ranch, larger now, with new buildings and more hands, and a herd that was the envy of the territory. A little girl with Running Wolf's dark eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin played in the dirt with a wooden horse, while a baby boy slept in a cradle nearby. Running Wolf rode up from the south pasture, and Sarah's heart still skipped a beat at the sight of him. He dismounted and swept their daughter into his arms, making her giggle as he tossed her up and caught her. "Mama, Papa caught a wolf," the little girl announced proudly. "A baby one." "Did he?" Sarah smiled as Running Wolf joined her on the porch, their daughter perched on his hip. "Found it tangled in old wire. Fixed it up and let it go." Running Wolf leaned over to kiss Sarah, gentle and familiar and perfect. "How's my boy?" "Sleeping like his father, impossible to wake." Running Wolf laughed and set their daughter down to play. Then he pulled Sarah against his side, and they stood together, watching the sun sink toward the mountains that guarded their valley. Happy he asked. Sarah thought about that day in the trading post, when she'd been so desperate she was willing to trade her last precious thing for a pound of cornmeal. Thought about how Running Wolf had looked at her like she was worth more than gold. Thought about every sunrise since then, every challenge they'd faced together, every moment of joy and sorrow and ordinary life that had brought them here. "More than I ever thought possible," she said truthfully. "You," Running Wolf pulled her closer, his hand warm on her waist. "I was half alive before you came. You made me whole, Sarah. You and these children, this life we built, this is everything I never knew I needed." Their daughter tugged on Sarah's skirt. "Tell me the story again, Mama, about how you and Papa met." Sarah exchanged a smile with Running Wolf, then scooped up their little girl. "Well," she began, "it started with a very long walk to a trading post and a man who saw a woman worth saving." As she told the story, their story, Running Wolf held her close, and the last light of day painted everything golden. This was what freedom looked like, Sarah thought. This was what love built. Not a fairy tale, but something better, something real, something earned, something that would last. Together, the autumn Running Wolf proposed became winter, and winter softened into spring. Sarah had never imagined happiness could feel so much like sunlight, warm, constant, something she could turn her face toward without fear. But life on the frontier had taught her that peace was always temporary, and danger never truly slept. It came on a Tuesday morning in late April. Sarah was in the kitchen, kneading dough for the midday meal, when she heard the thunder of hooves approaching at a full gallop. She wiped flour from her hands and moved to the window, her heart already beginning to race. Running Wolf was out with the hands, checking fences in the north pasture. A single rider came into view, young, his horse lathered with sweat, his face pale beneath the dust. He practically fell from the saddle in front of the house. Sarah was outside in seconds. "What's wrong? Where's Running Wolf?" The boy gasped. He couldn't have been more than 16, one of the hands from the neighboring ranch. "Is he here? North pasture. What happened?" "Fire. Big one. Started last night in the dry grass near Copper Creek. It's spreading fast, heading this way. Mr. Patterson sent me to warn everyone in the valley. We need every man who can swing a shovel or handle a wet blanket." Sarah's blood went cold. Prairie fires were a terror out here, capable of consuming everything in their path. She'd heard stories of entire ranches burned to nothing, animals and people caught in the flames. "I'll get him," she said. "You water your horse and rest. You look ready to collapse." She ran to the barn, saddled her mare with shaking hands, and rode hard toward the north pasture. The morning had been clear, but now she could see it, a dark smudge on the horizon, spreading like a stain across the sky. And beneath the smoke, an orange glow that made her stomach clench with fear. She found Running Wolf and 3 of the hands stringing new wire. He looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, and the smile that started on his face died when he saw her expression. "Fire," she said, breathless. "Coming from Copper Creek. The Patterson boy just arrived." Running Wolf didn't waste time with questions. He turned to his men. "Tom, ride to the main house and organize everyone. We need shovels, blankets, every water barrel we can load onto wagons. Send someone to town for more help." He swung up onto his horse in one smooth motion. "Sarah, you head back and start soaking blankets. We'll need them to beat out spot fires. I'm coming with you." "No, it's too dangerous." Sarah met his eyes, her jaw set. "We're partners, remember? Together. That means I don't stay safe while you ride into danger." Running Wolf's expression tightened, but he knew her well enough now to recognize when arguing was useless. "Stay close to me. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. No arguments." They rode together back to the ranch, and Sarah had never been more grateful for the long hours Running Wolf had spent teaching her to be useful in a crisis. She knew what to do without being told, organizing the household, directing the hands' wives to prepare food and medical supplies, loading wagons with equipment. Within the hour, a small army headed toward the fire. Running Wolf led them, sitting tall in the saddle, his face set with determination. Sarah rode beside him, a wet bandana tied over her nose and mouth, her hands already blistering from gripping the reins too tight. The fire was worse than she'd imagined. It stretched across miles of grassland, a wall of flame taller than a man, consuming everything with a roar that sounded like a living beast. The heat hit them long before they reached the firebreak, the desperate line men were digging in the dirt, trying to create a barrier the flames couldn't cross. "Sarah, you work the water wagons," Running Wolf shouted over the noise. "Keep the men's blankets wet. Don't get any closer to the fire line than you have to." He was gone before she could respond, already directing his men, his voice cutting through the chaos with calm authority. Sarah watched him for just a moment, this man she loved, throwing himself into danger to protect his land and his neighbors, and then she got to work. The next 8 hours were hell. Sarah's world narrowed to buckets and blankets, water and smoke. Her eyes burned, her lungs ached, her arms screamed with exhaustion, but she kept moving, kept working, because lives depended on it. Around her, men fought the flames with desperate courage, beating out spot fires, digging trenches, falling back when the heat became unbearable, and then pushing forward again. Running Wolf was everywhere at once, directing the firebreak, pulling men back from danger, leading by example, as he swung a shovel like his life depended on it. Sarah lost count of how many times she saw him disappear into the smoke, her heart stopping until he emerged again, soot-blackened, but alive. The sun was setting when the wind finally shifted. The flames, robbed of fuel by the firebreak and beaten back by exhausted men, began to die. Sarah stood swaying on her feet, watching the orange glow fade to smoldering embers, and felt tears cut tracks through the ash on her face. They'd done it. The ranch was safe. Running Wolf found her as the last light faded from the sky. He was covered in soot and burns, his hands raw and bleeding, but his eyes were fierce with triumph. He pulled her against him, and they stood together in the smoke-heavy darkness, holding each other like anchors in a storm. "You should have stayed back," he said into her hair, but there was no real anger in it, only relief that she was safe. "Next time, I will," Sarah lied. Running Wolf laughed, a rough sound that turned into a cough. "No, you won't. You're too stubborn. I learned from the best." They rode home as the stars came out, their horses plodding slowly, too tired for anything faster. The ranch was intact. Blackened grass surrounded it like a warning, but the building stood untouched. Sarah had never been so grateful to see that blue door. The hands dispersed to clean up and rest, but Running Wolf led Sarah straight to the house. He filled the tub with water hauled from the well, cold, but neither of them cared, and they washed the smoke and ash from each other's skin in silence, too exhausted for words. Later, lying in bed with Running Wolf's arm heavy across her waist, Sarah stared at the ceiling and thought about how quickly everything could change, how fragile their happiness was, how every day together was a gift that could be taken away in an instant. I know what you're thinking. Running Wolf murmured in the darkness. What am I thinking? That life is dangerous, that we could lose everything. His hand tightened on her hip. But Sarah, that's why we fight. That's why we hold on. Because the things worth having are worth protecting, even when it's hard. Sarah turned in his arms until she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. I was so afraid today. Every time you disappeared into the smoke, I thought, I know. He kissed her forehead gently. I felt the same every time I looked for you and couldn't find you. But we're here. We're safe. And tomorrow, we'll rebuild whatever was damaged and keep going. Together? Always together. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear. Yes, life was dangerous. Yes, they could lose everything. But as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came. Summer came with heat that baked the valley, and thunderstorms that rolled through like angry gods. The ranch recovered from the fire. New grass grew in the burned areas, fences were repaired, and life returned to its familiar rhythms. But Sarah noticed the change in Running Wolf. He was more watchful now, spending long evenings on the porch with his rifle across his knees, scanning the horizon like he expected trouble. At first, she thought it was just caution after the fire. Then she realized it was something else. "Tell me what's wrong," she said one evening, sitting beside him as the sun set. Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was troubled. "There's talk in town. The railroad's coming through this territory next year. They're already surveying routes, making deals for land. That's good, isn't it? It'll mean more trade, easier access to markets. It means powerful men looking at our land and seeing profit." Running Wolf's jaw tightened. "I've heard rumors that they want to run the line right through this valley, and when the railroad wants something, they usually get it, one way or another." Sarah's stomach sank. "They can't just take your land. You have legal title." "Legal title means different things to different people. To them, I'm half Lakota. That makes me less than human in their eyes, no matter what any paper says." He turned to look at her, and there was old pain in his eyes. "I've fought to keep this land before, Sarah. I'll fight again if I have to. But this time, I will. This time I'm fighting men with more money and power than I can imagine. Then we'll find another way." Sarah took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "We'll hire a lawyer. Sarah." Running Wolf squeezed her hand gently. "I need you to understand something. If this goes the way I think it will, if they decide they want this land badly enough, they won't stop at legal battles. They'll use violence, intimidation. They'll do whatever it takes. Then so will we." "No." His voice was firm. "If it comes to that, I'm sending you somewhere safe. I won't risk losing you for a piece of land." Sarah pulled her hand free and stood, anger flashing through her. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare try to protect me by pushing me away. This is my home too. This is our life. I'm not leaving you to fight alone." "Sarah?" "No." She faced him, hands on her hips. "You told me once that I wasn't property, that I was a person. That means I get to make my own choices, and I choose to stand with you, no matter what comes." Running Wolf stood slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Sarah thought he might argue. Then his hands cupped her face, gentle despite the calluses and scars. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he said quietly, "and the most stubborn. I learned from you. God help us both." But he was smiling when he kissed her, and Sarah felt the tension leave his shoulders as she wrapped her arms around him. The railroad surveyors came 2 weeks later. 3 men in city suits, riding horses that had clearly been rented in town, led by a thin man with spectacles and a ledger. They rode up to the ranch like they owned it, which Sarah supposed they thought they would soon. Running Wolf met them at the gate. Sarah stood on the porch, close enough to hear, but far enough to appear non-threatening. She'd learned to read situations like this, when to step forward and when to let Running Wolf handle things his way. "Mr. Wolf," the thin man said, consulting his ledger, "I'm Howard Pritchard, representing the Continental Railroad Company. We're surveying potential routes through this valley, and I'm here to discuss purchasing your property." "This property isn't for sale," Running Wolf said flatly. Pritchard smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "I understand your reluctance, but I assure you, the company is prepared to make a very generous offer. Much more than this land is worth, frankly." "Then you don't understand the value of land. This isn't just dirt and grass. It's home. Be that as it may, the railroad is coming through this valley. We can do this the easy way, with fair compensation and no trouble. Or—" Pritchard let the sentence hang, the threat implicit. Sarah saw Running Wolf's hands tighten on the rifle he held casually across his body. "Or what? You'll force me off my own land? You'll burn my home? Kill my livestock?" His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "I've fought claim jumpers and rustlers. I've survived range wars. You think a man in a fancy suit scares me?" Pritchard's smile disappeared. "I think you should consider your position carefully. The railroad has resources you can't imagine. Friends in very high places. If we have to go through legal channels, we will. And I promise you, you won't win. Maybe not, but I'll make it expensive and time-consuming. And I'll make sure everyone knows how the Continental Railroad treats honest landowners." Running Wolf took a step forward, and the surveyor's horses shifted nervously. "Now get off my property, and tell your bosses that Running Wolf doesn't scare easy." Pritchard's face flushed red. "You're making a mistake. I've made worse." The surveyors left, but Sarah knew they'd be back. Men like that always came back, with more money or more threats or more violence. She waited until they were out of sight before joining Running Wolf at the gate. "Well," she said, trying to lighten the mood, "that went better than I expected. No one got shot." Running Wolf didn't smile. "They'll send others, meaner ones, men who don't care about legal niceties." "Then we'll deal with them too." Sarah leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "We've faced worse, haven't we?" "Yes, but I never had so much to lose before." Sarah understood what he meant. Before her, Running Wolf had been alone. His life had been his own to risk. Now, every threat to the ranch was a threat to their future together, to the children they hoped to have, to the life they were building. "We're not going to lose," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We're going to fight, and we're going to win." "You really believe that?" "I have to. The alternative is unthinkable." Running Wolf pulled her close, and they stood together watching the sun sink toward the mountains that guarded their valley. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. A real storm this time, bringing the kind of rain the parched land desperately needed. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that another kind of storm was coming, one that would test them in ways the fire never had. The railroad sent lawyers first. Then they sent intimidators, rough men who showed up at neighboring ranches with offers that couldn't be refused. One by one, Running Wolf's neighbors sold their land for pennies on the dollar, too afraid to stand against the railroad's power. Only Running Wolf held firm. The pressure increased. Fences were cut. Cattle disappeared. Supplies that Running Wolf ordered from town never arrived. It was death by 1,000 cuts, designed to drive them into poverty and desperation. But Running Wolf had fought too hard for this land to give up now. He repaired the fences. He posted guards on the herds. He rode to other towns for supplies. And through it all, Sarah stood beside him, matching his determination with her own. "They're trying to break us," Tom said one evening after another week of sabotage. The old cowboy looked tired, his weathered face drawn with worry. "Boss, maybe you should consider—" "No." Running Wolf's voice was steel. "This land is mine. I built it from nothing, and I'm not handing it over to men who think money makes them gods. They got more than money. They got the law on their side. Then the law is wrong." Sarah placed a hand on Running Wolf's shoulder, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "Tom, we appreciate your concern, but we've made our choice. If you want to leave, we'll understand. No man should have to risk his life for someone else's fight." Tom straightened, looking insulted. "Ma'am, I've been riding for Running Wolf for 8 years. I was here when he fought off them claim jumpers in '79. I was here during the blizzard of '80, when we thought we'd lose the whole herd." He looked at Running Wolf with something like affection. "I ain't leaving now. None of us are." The other hands murmured agreement, and Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. This was what Running Wolf had built, not just a ranch, but a family. Men who were loyal not because they had to be, but because they chose to be. "Thank you," Running Wolf said quietly, and Sarah heard the emotion in his voice that he worked so hard to hide. The attacks escalated. One night, someone set fire to the hay barn. They caught it in time, but only barely. Another night, shots were fired at the house. Warning shots, meant to frighten rather than kill, but frightening nonetheless. Running Wolf doubled the guards and started sleeping with his rifle within arm's reach. Sarah learned to wake at the slightest sound, her heart racing in the darkness as she listened for danger. "This can't go on," she said one morning, after yet another sleepless night. "We're living like we're under siege." "I know." Running Wolf stared out the window, his face drawn with exhaustion. "But I don't know what else to do. If I give in, if I sell, then they win, and every other small rancher in the territory will know that the railroad can't be beaten. So we become martyrs? If we have to." Sarah wanted to argue, but she understood. This wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about principle, about refusing to bow to men who thought power gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. But principles didn't stop bullets. Principles didn't protect the people she loved. The crisis came on a Saturday in late September. Sarah had ridden into town for supplies, accompanied by Tom and another hand named Pete. They were loading the wagon when she saw them, 5 men lounging outside the saloon, watching her with predatory interest. "Mrs. Wolf," one of them called out, tipping his hat in a mockery of politeness. "Heard your husband's been causing trouble for the railroad." Sarah ignored him, continuing to load supplies. Tom and Pete positioned themselves protectively, their hands near their guns. "Now that ain't friendly," the man continued, pushing off from the saloon wall. "We're just trying to have a conversation." "We're not interested," Sarah said coldly. Maybe you should be. See, the railroad's getting tired of your husband's stubbornness. They sent us to deliver a message." He smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. "Sell the land, or people are gonna get hurt, starting with you." Tom's gun cleared leather in a heartbeat, trained on the man's chest. "Touch her, and you're a dead man." The other 4 men drew their weapons, and suddenly, the street was frozen in a deadly tableau. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "You're threatening to harm a woman in broad daylight in front of witnesses? That's bold, even for railroad thugs. Who's gonna stop us? The sheriff?" The man laughed. "He knows which side his bread's buttered on. I will." Everyone turned. Running Wolf stood at the end of the street, his rifle in hand, flanked by the rest of his crew. His face was carved from stone, his eyes burning with cold fury. "You threaten my wife," he said, his voice carrying across the street. "You threaten me, and I promise you, that's a fight you won't walk away from." The tension ratcheted higher. Sarah could see bystanders ducking into buildings, mothers pulling children off the street. This was going to end in bloodshed. She could feel it building like a storm. Running Wolf. The sheriff emerged from his office, hands raised placatingly. He was a tired-looking man named Morrison, caught between his duty and his fear of the railroad. "Let's all calm down now. Tell them to leave my wife alone. Boys, maybe you should." "We're just delivering a message, Sheriff," the lead thug said. "Ain't breaking no laws." "Threatening a woman is against the law in my town," Morrison said, finding some spine. "And I'm telling all of you to stand down before someone does something stupid." For a long moment, no one moved. Sarah held her breath, watching Running Wolf's face, seeing the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, deciding if this was the moment to make a stand. Then, slowly, Running Wolf lowered his rifle. "Sarah, get in the wagon. Tom, Pete, mount up. We're leaving." "Smart man," the thug said mockingly. Running Wolf turned to look at him, and Sarah saw something in her husband's eyes that made her blood run cold. "No," he said quietly. "A smart man would have never threatened my family. But you've done that now, and there are consequences for that kind of mistake. You tell your railroad bosses that Running Wolf is done being patient, done being reasonable. From now on, anyone who comes onto my land uninvited will be treated as an enemy, and I don't show mercy to my enemies." He walked over to Sarah, his hand gentle on her back as he helped her into the wagon, despite her being perfectly capable of climbing up herself. But she understood the gesture. He was demonstrating that she was precious to him. That threatening her was the worst mistake anyone could make. They rode out of town in tense silence. Sarah could feel the eyes on her back, feel the weight of unspoken threats. When they were finally away from town, out on the open road, she let out a shaky breath. "That was close," Tom said. "Too close." Running Wolf rode beside the wagon, his face still hard. "They're escalating. Next time, it won't just be threats." "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked. Running Wolf looked at her, and she saw fear beneath the anger. Fear for her. Fear of what he might have to become to protect what was his. Whatever it takes. That night, Running Wolf called a meeting of all the hands. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, listening as he laid out their situation with brutal honesty. "The railroad wants this land. They're willing to kill to get it. Anyone who stays is putting their life on the line." He met each man's eyes in turn. "I won't think less of anyone who wants to leave. This is my fight, not yours." "It's our fight too, boss," Tom said, and the others nodded. This is our home as much as yours. Then here's what we're going to do. Running Wolf spread a map on the table. We fortify, turn this ranch into something they can't easily take. We dig trenches here and here, build barriers at the approach roads, post guards in shifts around the clock, and we send word to every newspaper in the territory about what the railroad's doing. We make this public, make it impossible for them to act without scrutiny. That's gonna cost money we don't have, Pete pointed out. I have some savings, Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Gold coins I've been putting aside from egg money and sewing work. It's not much, but it's enough to hire a lawyer in Denver. A good one. Running Wolf stared at her. Sarah, that money's for our future. And our future is this ranch. She reached across the table to take his hand. Use it. Fight with it. Win with it. Something shifted in Running Wolf's expression. Gratitude and love and determination, all mixed together. All right, we fight. He looked around at his men. This is going to get ugly. The railroad won't stop until we stop them, one way or another. But if we stand together, if we're smart and prepared, we have a chance. The next few weeks were a frenzy of activity. They dug defensive positions. They stockpiled ammunition and supplies. Sarah wrote letters to every newspaper she could think of, detailing the railroad's tactics and her husband's struggle to keep his legally owned land. And slowly, miraculously, public opinion began to shift. Other ranchers who'd been forced to sell started speaking out. A reporter from Denver came to interview Running Wolf, then wrote a scathing piece about the railroad's land grab tactics. Suddenly, Running Wolf wasn't just some half-breed rancher fighting a losing battle. He was David standing against Goliath, and people loved that story. The railroad didn't love it at all. They're furious, the lawyer Sarah hired reported on his second visit. His name was Jonathan Webb, a young man with fire in his eyes and a genuine hatred of corporate bullying. The publicity is hurting them. Investors are asking questions. Politicians are distancing themselves. But that makes them more dangerous, not less. Let them come, Running Wolf said. We're ready. They came on a cold October night, 3 weeks after Sarah's story had made the front page of the Denver Post. The watch called out the alarm. Riders approaching from 3 directions, at least 15 men, all armed. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was an attack. Running Wolf had prepared for this. His men took up their positions with military precision, and he positioned himself at the main gate with Sarah beside him, despite his protests. I'm staying, she'd said flatly. We're partners. That means we face this together. The riders stopped just outside rifle range. A man Sarah recognized from town, Frank Rollins, the railroad's chief enforcer, rode forward carrying a white flag. Running Wolf, he called out, this is your last chance. The railroads authorized me to offer you $10,000 for this land. That's more than fair. Take it and walk away, and no one gets hurt. My answer's the same as it's always been. No. Then you're a fool. We've got 15 men out here, and more coming. You can't win this fight. Maybe not. Running Wolf raised his voice so it carried across the darkness. But I'll make damn sure you don't win it either. Every man out there, you should know this. You're about to attack a legal landowner defending his property. That makes you criminals. And worse, you're doing it for men who'll throw you away the second you're not useful anymore. Is that really worth dying for? There was a murmur among the riders. Sarah could see them shifting, uncertain. Rollins's face darkened with anger. Fire, he shouted. The night exploded with gunfire. But Running Wolf had chosen his ground well. His men were protected behind barriers and trenches, while the attackers were exposed. Within seconds, 3 riders were down, and the rest were scrambling for cover. Sarah worked the lever on her rifle with shaking hands, shooting at muzzle flashes in the darkness. Beside her, Running Wolf was a steady presence, his own rifle barking methodically as he picked off targets with deadly accuracy. The fight lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of chaos and fear, and the overwhelming noise of violence. When it ended, 5 of the attackers were dead or wounded, and the rest had fled. Running Wolf's men had suffered some injuries. Tom took a bullet in the arm. Pete was grazed across the ribs. But everyone was alive. "Check the perimeter," Running Wolf ordered. "Make sure they're really gone." Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of what had just happened was crashing over her. They'd been in a gunfight. People had died. And it could happen again tomorrow, or next week, or... Sarah. Running Wolf pulled her against him, his arms tight around her. "Breathe. Just breathe." She buried her face in his chest and tried to stop shaking. "I shot at people," she whispered. "I don't know if I hit anyone, but I shot at them." "I know, and I'm sorry you had to. But you protected our home. You protected yourself. That's nothing to be ashamed of." The sheriff arrived an hour later, clearly unhappy about being roused from his bed. But when he saw the dead men, all known railroad enforcers, all armed, even he couldn't ignore what had happened. "This is getting out of hand," Morrison said, looking at the carnage. "The railroad's gone too far this time." "You think?" Running Wolf's voice was bitter. "Where were you when they were threatening my wife, when they were burning my property?" Morrison had the grace to look ashamed. "I'll file a report, document this as self-defense, and I'll send a telegram to the territorial governor. This needs to stop before more people die." It took another 3 months, but eventually the public pressure became too much. The railroad agreed to reroute their line, and Running Wolf's ranch was left alone. The victory wasn't complete. Some of his neighbors had still lost their land, and the railroad's reputation emerged surprisingly intact. But Running Wolf kept his home. On a clear December evening, with snow dusting the mountains and the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, Sarah stood with Running Wolf on their porch and looked out at the land they'd fought so hard to keep. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. "All the fear, the violence, the sleepless nights?" Running Wolf considered the question seriously. "Yes, because this place isn't just dirt and grass. It's proof that a half-breed orphan can build something that matters. It's proof that ordinary people can stand against power and win. And it's home." He turned to look at her, his eyes soft in the fading light. "Our home. The place where we'll raise our children and grow old together. How could that not be worth fighting for?" Sarah leaned against him, and they watched the sun set over their valley, scarred by fire and conflict, but still standing, still theirs. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Running Wolf kissed the top of her head. "And I promise, from now on, life is going to be boring." Sarah laughed. "I don't believe that for a second." "No? Why not?" "Because boring people don't fight railroads. Boring people don't build ranches in the wilderness. Boring people don't fall in love with desperate women at trading posts and change their whole life." "Fair point." Running Wolf smiled, and Sarah felt her heart swell with love for this man who'd saved her and let her save him in return. "How about this? Life will be less exciting. Fewer gunfights, more quiet evenings. Fewer death threats, more..." "Papa!" They both turned. Their daughter, 5 years old now, with Running Wolf's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes, ran toward them through the snow, laughing as their son chased her with a handful of snow. Behind them, Tom and the other hands were closing up the barn for the night, their voices carrying across the quiet evening. "Dinner's ready," Sarah called, and their children raced toward the house, tracking snow and joy in equal measure. Running Wolf caught her hand as they followed the children inside. "This," he said quietly, "this is what it was all for. Not the land or the ranch or the principal. This, our family, our life together." "Together," Sarah agreed, and they went inside to the warmth and light and love they'd built from nothing but determination and hope. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah and Running Wolf's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.